My only daughter threw me out of her wedding, but what her groom did next shocked the entire room and changed my life forever. That's the sentence that keeps echoing in my head like a church bell. You read it, and you think you know how the story ends. You don't, because I'm not the man people expected me to be that night. My name is Samuel Everett. I'm a 68-year-old black man from New Orleans, Louisiana, and this is how my life was split in two before and after my daughter's wedding. 3 hours before that humiliating moment, I was in my small apartment in the Treme neighborhood, tying my bow tie with trembling hands. My fingers aren't as steady as they used to be, but I took my time. The deep burgundy suit jacket I wore had been pressed to perfection, each crease a sign of the respect I still held for myself and for my only child. The scent of my grandfather's old cologne, musk and oakwood, rose from my wrists and mixed with the smell of chicory coffee cooling on the kitchen counter. I hadn't eaten more than half a biscuit for breakfast. Nerves don't leave much room for food. That day wasn't just my daughter's wedding. It was supposed to be our reconciliation. At 68, after a lifetime of sacrifices, of night shifts, of standing on tired feet at the shipyard and later at the hotel loading dock, I believed she would finally see me for who I truly was. As I slid on the gold cufflinks my late wife, Marilyn, had given me on our 10th anniversary, I thought about the nights I'd stayed up with little Grace when she had asthma attacks, how I'd read to her from worn-out library books until she fell asleep. I thought about all the side hustles I'd worked, cleaning kitchens, repairing floors, fixing cars, so she could go to the private high school she wanted. Everything, every sacrifice, led to that day. Today, I told the man in the mirror, she'll finally understand. The phone rang, startling me. It was my younger sister, Victoria Lee. She's been my rock since Marilyn passed. "Sam, how you holding up? You ready for the big day?" she asked. I swallowed hard. More than ready. I've got a feeling things are going to be different between me and Grace today. She went quiet. She knows our history. How the calls got shorter, the visits rarer after Grace moved in with her fiancé, Theodore Carter, a young lawyer from Atlanta. "Don't expect too much," she said gently. "Protect your heart." But I'd already decided. Today would be the day my daughter gave me back my place in her life. I picked up the gift I'd been paying off for a year, a fine bone china set from a black-owned shop on Claiborne Avenue. Each plate was an apology, each cup a hope. I'd even sold the last piece of jewelry Marilyn had left me, our wedding ring, to pay it off in full. At exactly 2 p.m., the taxi I'd booked pulled up. As we drove past the oak-lined streets and shotgun houses, I kept picturing it. Grace seeing me, walking toward me with open arms. The hug, the sweet words, the forgiveness. The church, Mount Olive Baptist, was decorated just the way Grace had always dreamed. White lilies and pale pink roses everywhere, brass lanterns flickering like stars. I arrived early to get a good seat, somewhere near the front where she could see me. But when I approached the first pews, a young event planner in a sharp navy suit blocked my way. "Excuse me, sir. Those seats are reserved for immediate family." I smiled, proud. I'm the father of the bride. He checked his list, frowning. "I'm sorry, sir. You're listed at the 6th row." The smile slipped from my face. 6th row. As if I were a guest, not the man who raised her alone after her mama died. But I walked back slowly and sat where they told me, surrounded by strangers, co-workers of Theodore's, distant friends of Grace's, people who'd entered her life long after I'd given her mine. The music swelled, and there she was, Grace, my baby girl, now 28, gliding down the aisle in a white lace gown, radiant as the sun. My heart filled with love and hope. Surely this was all just a misunderstanding. Surely at the reception things would be different. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Theodore seemed like a good man. The way he looked at her, steady, proud, gave me comfort. At least she had found someone who loved her. That was what mattered, right? When it ended, I tried to approach them, but the crowd around them was thick, and I barely managed to brush Grace's cheek with a quick kiss. "You look beautiful, baby," I whispered. She gave me a tight smile and turned to another guest. The reception was held at the Garden View Hall, an elegant space with tall windows opening onto a courtyard. Tables draped in cream cloths, fresh flowers, candles flickering. I walked in with my gift under my arm, scanning for my assigned table. My heart sank when I saw it. Table 11, way at the back near the kitchen doors, so far from the head table I could barely make out my daughter's face. My table mates were strangers, too, obligatory invites pushed to the margins like me. "You kin to the bride?" asked an older lady next to me. "I'm her father," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She blinked at me, clearly confused why the father was sitting so far back. I wondered the same. From my seat, I watched Grace laugh with Theodore's mother, hug her co-workers, glow in their attention. Each gesture was a little knife to my chest. When the waiters served dinner, they started with the head table, of course. By the time they reached ours, the food was lukewarm. The chicken tasted like cardboard, the wine like ash in my throat. But I waited. Maybe during the toasts. Maybe then she would mention me. Thank me for everything. Give me a word, a glance, anything. Theodore spoke first. A fine speech. He thanked his parents, his mentors, his colleagues. Talked about his dreams with Grace. Everyone applauded. Then Grace stood up. She was breathtaking, her cheeks flushed with champagne and joy. She raised her glass and smiled. "I want to thank all the special people who are here with me today," she began. "Friends who've become family, colleagues who've become brothers and sisters." My breath caught. "Here it comes. I've learned family isn't always blood," she said. "Real family is the people who choose you, who lift you up, who make you grow." The words struck me like stones. "My chosen family are the ones who make me happy," she declared, raising her glass higher. The hall erupted in applause, and then her eyes met mine for the first time all night. But there was no love there, no gratitude, only contempt. "And I also want to say," she continued, voice ringing clear over the clinking glasses, "that there are people who don't deserve to be in this special moment. People who bring only bitterness and negativity into our lives." The room fell silent. Faces turned toward me because everyone knew who she meant. My face burned. I couldn't breathe. "Dad," she said finally. The word I'd waited years to hear sounded like a verdict. "You can leave." The silence was deafening. 200 eyes on me. I felt my world collapse. My hands trembled as I placed a napkin on the table. My perfectly pressed suit now felt like a clown costume. I stood slowly, holding on to my dignity like a life raft. And then something happened I hadn't expected at all. Theodore, sitting beside Grace, also stood. His eyes, moments ago bright with happiness, now burned with something else. Cold anger. That's where my story really begins. Theodore's chair scraped against the parquet like a blade. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Grace. Her hand clutched his sleeve, small and perfect against the black of his suit. "What are you doing?" she whispered, smile frozen on her face for the cameras still trained on the head table. He eased his arm free, gentle but firm. Then he stepped toward the microphone at the center of the room. The band quieted. The server stopped mid-stride, balancing trays. You could hear ice clinking glasses, someone's nervous breath, the soft whir of a video camera still rolling. "Before Mr. Everett leaves," Theodore said, voice low but carrying, "I think there are some things everyone here should know." Grace moved fast, that pageant smile evaporating. "Theo, don't," she hissed, reaching for the mic. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her the way a man looks when he recognizes the cost of the truth and decides to pay it anyway. "When we started dating 3 years ago," he said, "Grace told me her father was difficult, negative, controlling. She said he criticized everything and didn't support her choices." A cold shiver ran along my spine. I stayed standing by table 11, one hand braced on the chair back because my knees weren't entirely convinced they could hold me. "I believed her," Theodore went on, "because I trusted her, because I wanted to. But a month ago, something didn't add up. So I did what any man who intends to build a family should do. I looked for the whole truth." Grace's jaw clenched. "Stop. This is not the time." "It's exactly the time," he said, still calm. He turned his head and scanned the room until he found me. "I went to see Miss Victoria Lee, Grace's aunt, Mr. Everett's younger sister. I asked her for the full story." 100 faces rotated from him to me. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Victoria hadn't told me he came. Lord, I could almost hear her now. Sam, protect your heart. What I learned, Theodore said, is that the man you just tried to push out of this room has spent his whole life pulling other people into safety. He lifted his chin toward me. Samuel Everett became a widower when Grace was 12 years old. He worked long days at the shipyard and longer nights hauling and loading at the hotel, so she'd never miss a fee, never skip a meal, never feel poor in a city that will make you feel poor without even trying. There was a murmur, like the room exhaled all at once. I stared at the candle on our table until it blurred. Mr. Everett sold his wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry his wife left him, to buy the china set Grace asked for. He gestured toward the gift stacked beside the head table, my careful wrapping now bright under the lights like a spotlight. He paid for it over 12 months, then sold what memory he had left to finish the bill. I pressed my palm to my chest. I didn't know the man could wound me with kindness. He took double shifts to send Grace to St. Augustine High for their dual enrollment program, Theodore continued, and later fronted deposits and first month's rents when she moved for her first internship. He's the reason she could say yes to late nights at the firm instead of a second job at a diner. And when she battled a bronchial infection her sophomore year, he sat upright in a chair for 3 nights in a row so she could sleep in his bed. He paid for the private clinic when the ER wait was 8 hours deep. Grace's face crumpled, then stiffened again. Theo, and in the last 3 years, he said, turning slightly. Do you know how many times Grace visited her father? 3. 3 times in 3 years. Do you know how many times she declined his calls? His eyes slid to me again, and softer now he said, Too many to count. The silence was a cathedral. Somewhere a spoon rang against a glass, accidental and thin. What broke me, Theodore said, voice roughening for the first time, was not just the neglect, but the contempt. When I asked if we should invite her father to the rehearsal dinner, Grace said he didn't deserve a seat at our special table. When I insisted on inviting him to the wedding, because I believed maybe there was a path to reconciliation, she told the planner to put him in the back, far from the head table. She chose to humiliate the man who raised her. He looked at me like a man trying to apologize with his eyes. Mr. Everett, I didn't know. I'm sorry you had to walk into a room designed to make you small. Grace's composure cracked. Tears streaked her foundation. This is our wedding, she said, voice shaking. You are ruining it. No, Grace, Theodore said quietly. The ruin happened long before we poured champagne. He set the microphone down and faced her. No drama, no flourish, just a man who'd reached the end of pretending. He slid his ring from his finger and placed it on the linen beside her bouquet, as carefully as you might set down a sleeping child. I can't marry someone who treats her own father like this, he said. I won't build a home on contempt. A ripple rolled through the hall. Shock, then whispers. Then the hard stillness of people realizing a story they wanted to be soft at edges. Grace gasped like a person struck. No, she said, stepping toward him. Theo, please. We can talk. We can fix it. Daddy. That word, Daddy, spun like a coin about to drop, but this time it wasn't mine to catch. Theodore turned to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. There will be no wedding today. A server put down a tray that trembled in her hand. Someone in the back swore, low and breathy. Phones lifted, screens blinking into record. I felt the world tilt and then right itself, like a boat finding balance after a hard wave. Grace's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, white silk pooling around her like the ghost of a swan. Daddy, she sobbed, reaching toward me, fingers opening and closing like she was drowning and reaching for the dock. Please, tell him it's not. I could have said many things. I could have reached for her like I did when she was 6 and fell off her bike on Ursuline Avenue, blood on her knee and fury in her eyes. But men learn, sometimes too late, that love without truth is only indulgence dressed up in Sunday clothes. I picked up my hat from the back of my chair and set it on my head. The room parted for me, the way a congregation parts when the pallbearers pass with the casket. No one touched me. No one spoke. I walked between tables of flowers and candles and plates of food that would go cold, past people who had known me for 10 seconds and others who had thought they knew my daughter for 10 years, and I kept my back straight. My feet found the courage my heart borrowed. At the doors of Garden View Hall, a young usher in a too-tight vest moved to open them for me. His eyes shone. "Sir," he whispered, "I'm sorry." "Son," I said, "me too." The courtyard air was cool and clean, a mercy after the overheated room. Crickets sang from the hedges, and the fountain's soft trickle sounded like someone whispering hush, hush to a crying child. I walked to a bench beneath a crepe myrtle and sat, hands folded on my knees. The music inside had stopped. In its place rose the muffled commotion of panic, the sound of a party collapsing into aftermath. I breathed. In, out, in again. The old cologne on my wrist had faded to a gentler note, something like pine. I thought of Marilyn then, how she would have said, "Samuel, stand up straight. Your father taught you how to hold your head when the world tries to lower it." I could almost feel her palm at my back. My phone vibrated in my pocket. "Victoria," the screen said. I answered. "Hey, V. I just got a call from Theodore." Her voice was tight, controlled. "He told me what happened. Are you all right?" I looked up at the slices of sky, caught between branches. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "I feel like I've been standing in a storm, and suddenly the rain stopped. You know how you still hear it after." "Come to my place," she said. "Tonight. Don't sit alone with this." A door opened, and a cluster of guests spilled into the courtyard, their voices a blend of pity and rubbernecking. I turned away from them, and they, mercifully, gave me distance. "V," I said. For the first time in a long time, I feel "don't laugh" seen. She didn't laugh. "I'm not laughing," she said. "I'm proud." A shadow moved in the doorway. For a second, I thought it was Theodore. It wasn't, just an usher collecting himself. I closed my eyes. The ache in my chest softened, not because the hurt was smaller, but because something else had started, something with edges of its own. Respect. Dignity. The awareness that my life was not a hostage to whether my daughter loved me in public. "I'm coming to you," I told Victoria, "but I'm going to sit here 5 more minutes. I need to let the ground stop moving." "Take your time," she said. "Then bring your time to me." We hung up. I set the phone beside me on the bench. Inside, a woman shouted, "Turn that camera off." Someone cried hard, messy sobs that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with consequence. I tilted my face to the night. The crepe myrtle shifted in a small breeze, dropping a petal onto my knee. I brushed it away and let my hands rest, palms open. I was alone on the bench, but I was not deserted. Something in me that had bent for years unbent, one careful vertebra at a time. When I finally stood, the bench made a small sound of wood easing. I picked up my gift, my year of payments and my final ring, and tucked it under my arm. Then I walked toward the gate, not fleeing, not chased, simply leaving of my own will. There was no triumph in it, but there was a kind of peace. Not the peace of a problem solved. God knows nothing was solved, but the peace of choosing the door yourself. I stepped into the New Orleans night, where the streetlights laid down long gold ladders on the sidewalk, and the air tasted faintly of river and time. Somewhere not far, a trumpet practiced a run and missed a note, then found it again. I smiled without meaning to. One foot, then the other. Home first, then victorious. Tomorrow could come when it wanted. Tonight, I would keep my head. By the time I reached Victoria's house, the city had folded itself into silence. Even Bourbon Street sounded far away, as if New Orleans herself was tired of watching people hurt each other. Her porch light glowed soft yellow, same as it had for 40 years. When I stepped up, the screen door squeaked, and there she was, my little sister in her robe and house shoes, hair tied up in a scarf, holding 2 mugs of steaming tea. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, opening the door wider. "Come in here, Sam." I stepped inside. The smell of lemon oil and vanilla hit me, same as always. Her house was one of those places where time doesn't pass. It just circles back around to comfort you. I sat on her couch, The one covered in that floral fabric she'd had since the 90s, and she pressed a mug into my hands. Chamomile with honey. Always honey. You don't have to say a word yet, she said, sitting across from me. Just breathe. I nodded, but my breath still came like something heavy dragging chains. Did Theodore really say all that? She asked softly after a while. I nodded again. Every word. Victoria shook her head slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. That man's got courage. He told me he was going to do something if she disrespected you again, but I didn't think he meant in front of 200 people. Her words sank in like stones dropping into deep water. You knew. I knew he was troubled by what she'd been saying, she admitted. He came by last month asking questions. Wanted to know what kind of man you were. I told him everything. About how you sold the ring. About Marilyn. About Grace's asthma and the nights you stayed up rubbing her back when she couldn't breathe. I stared at my tea, the surface trembling. And you didn't tell me? I wanted to, she said gently. But he made me promise. Said he needed to hear it from you when the time was right. Said if he told you too soon, you might talk him out of it. I huffed something that was almost a laugh, but not quite. Well, he sure didn't need my permission to tear the whole wedding down. Victoria leaned forward, placing her hand over mine. You listen to me, Samuel Everett. That man didn't tear nothing down. He just took the blindfold off everyone in that room. Grace built that whole fantasy on lies, and he just opened the windows and let the light in. I sat back, staring at the framed photos on her mantel, our mama in her church hat, Daddy in his Sunday suit, the two of us as kids in front of the old shotgun house. Still, I said quietly, it hurts like hell. She nodded. It's supposed to. That's how you know you still love her. Silence settled over us, thick but not suffocating. Outside, crickets chirped, and the hum of the city drifted through the half-open window. Distant horns, laughter, the faint roll of the river. She's probably falling apart right now, Victoria said after a while. That girl's never had to face the truth head-on. You always cushioned her from it. She called me names, V. I said quietly. You should have heard her voice. Like I was the weight around her neck. Victoria sighed. Children don't understand the kind of love that sacrifices itself. They think it's control because it reminds them of how small they used to be. Grace ain't evil, Sam. She's just blind. I rubbed a hand over my face, feeling the roughness of my beard. Blind or not, she humiliated me. And herself. Maybe humiliation's the only teacher left that she'll listen to. Her words lingered in the air. I thought about Grace, her perfect posture, her practiced smile, the way she used to tug my sleeve when she was little and say, Daddy, look what I drew. Somewhere between those drawings and that wedding speech, something had broken. Maybe I'd let it break. Victoria stood, disappearing into the kitchen, and came back with a plate of cornbread. Eat something, she said. You can't fix nothing on an empty stomach. I smiled faintly, tearing off a piece. The warmth spread through me, a comfort older than the pain. You think Theodore's really done with her? I think, she said, sitting again. He's the only man who ever saw her clearly. Whether he's done or not, that girl's gonna have to live with the reflection he handed her tonight. I swallowed hard. And me. You, she said, pointing the fork at me, are gonna rest, cry if you need to, and start living your life for yourself for once. No more waiting on that girl to say she sees you. You've already been seen. I nodded, but inside, I still felt hollow. The kind of hollow that comes after a storm when the roof's still standing, but everything inside's been soaked through. I don't know what to do tomorrow. She smiled. Then don't do tomorrow yet. Just finish your tea. We talked a little longer, about Mama, about the neighborhood, about anything that wasn't Grace. By midnight, I was half asleep on her couch. Victoria covered me with the same quilt our Mama used to put over us when the power went out during hurricanes. When I woke up, the light coming through the blinds was soft and gold. I could hear Victoria humming in the kitchen, the smell of bacon and biscuits filling the air. For a second, I almost believed I was a kid again. Morning, she said when she saw me stir. Coffee's ready. I sat up slowly, body aching from both the couch and the weight of last night. Morning. She poured me a cup and slid it over. You got plans today? Not really, I said, though I knew I couldn't hide forever. Might stop by the river. Clear my head. Good idea. Let the water take what it can. I nodded and took a sip. The bitterness grounded me. You think she'll try to call? Oh, she'll call, Victoria said without hesitation. And cry. And beg. And maybe blame. Don't answer till you're ready. What if she does something stupid? She won't. Grace may be selfish, but she ain't foolish. Let her sit in what she built. It's the only way she'll start tearing it down. Her words made sense, but the father in me still hurt. You ever stop loving your kids when they hurt you? Victoria smiled sadly. I never had kids, but I've been watching you long enough to know. Love don't stop, Sam. It just changes shape. We finished breakfast mostly in silence. Around 10, I thanked her, promised to call, and stepped out into the humid morning. The air smelled of rain, though the sky was clear. New Orleans has that trick, making you feel like a storm's always near. I walked toward the river, hands in my pockets, passing the small stores and corner stands setting up for the day. People nodded, some recognizing me from somewhere they couldn't quite place. Maybe they'd seen me years ago loading trucks at the Marriott, or maybe they just saw a tired man and nodded out of respect. At the riverfront, I leaned against the railing, watching the slow brown current roll by. It looked calm, but I knew its power. The Mississippi hides its strength deep beneath the surface, kind of like me, I supposed. I took out my phone. No new messages. No missed calls yet. I should have felt relief, but what I felt instead was a kind of sadness that sat quiet and patient, like it planned to stay a while. I thought about Marilyn again, her laugh, the way she used to hum, "Ain't No Sunshine," while she cooked. She would have known what to say. She always did. And I thought about Grace, wondering what she was doing in that big fancy apartment Theodore had gotten for them downtown. Maybe she was still in her wedding dress, crying. Maybe she was blaming me. Maybe she was finally seeing me. For the first time since the ceremony, I let the tears come. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet, steady, like the river itself. They weren't all sadness. Some were release. Some were gratitude that I had survived enough to stand here and still feel anything at all. After a while, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then it buzzed again. Still unknown. Finally, it stopped. I turned it off completely. The city moved around me, buses sighing, seagulls crying, steamboats groaning their horns. Life, indifferent and infinite. Victoria's words echoed in my mind. You've already been seen. I straightened my back, took one last look at the river, and started walking home. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first morning of my new life. I just didn't have a name for it yet. By late afternoon, the heat rose off the sidewalks in slow waves, and the cicadas tuned up like they'd been paid to fill the silence I'd been keeping. I'd walked the riverfront, crossed back through Jackson Square, and let my feet carry me home without asking where they were going. When I opened the door to my apartment, the air inside felt a degree cooler and 10 degrees lonelier. I set the china box, the one I'd hauled out of that reception like a relic, on the kitchen table. The gold ribbon had come loose somewhere between Garden View Hall and Treme, and the bow drooped like a tired smile. I pulled out a chair and sat. The old clock above the sink ticked loud as a metronome for grief. I turned my phone on. The screen woke like an eye. There they were, 6 missed calls from a number I knew but had never saved, and 3 from unknown. 2 texts blinked in. Grace, Dad, please answer. Grace, I need you. I stared at the words until they softened at the edges. Need wasn't the same as love. Need could be a fire that ate everything it touched. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then swiped. Mr. Everett? The voice was steady, warm. It's Theodore. My throat closed for a second. Son, I hope I'm not intruding. No, I said. You've already walked into the worst room. A phone call can't do worse. He let out a breath that could have been a laugh if it weren't so tired. I wanted to apologize. I should have found the courage sooner. I believed what I wanted to believe about Grace. That's on me. You told the truth, I said. There's never a wrong time for that, even if it shows up late. He was quiet a moment. After I left, I talked to some people in the lobby. Her co-workers. A couple of bridesmaids. I wanted to understand how I'd missed it. They painted a picture I didn't like. He hesitated. She's not kind to people she thinks are beneath her. Not the cleaning crew at her firm. Not restaurant staff. Not strangers. It wasn't just you. I pressed my palm against the cool tabletop. A man will ignore a lot until the truth stands up in the middle of his own house. I called Miss Victoria earlier, he said. I told her I'd check on you. She said you'd say you don't need checking on. Your fiancé called me difficult for years, I said, and felt the old words sag and fall away. Turns out I'm just stubborn. I'll be fine. I don't know what to do with today, he said. I'm angry and ashamed and somehow relieved. You do it the way we do hurricanes, I told him. You board up what you can, check on your neighbors, and trust the foundation you pour before the wind came. He exhaled again. Mr. Everett. Samuel, I'm sorry you were asked to leave a room you built with your sacrifices. No one had the right. I looked at the china ribbon. Apology accepted. But son, save a little of that for yourself. Shame is a poor carpenter. It doesn't build anything. He went quiet long enough for me to hear traffic whispering down Claiborne. Thank you, he said, for that and for everything you did for Grace, even if she can't say it. Maybe one day, I said, not promising it to him or to myself. Maybe not. We said goodbye like men who'd met in a fire and passed each other a bucket. When the line clicked dead, I sat still, letting the silence settle back into the room like furniture. The next call came from Victoria. You eat yet? Was how she started. I will, I said, which meant I hadn't. I'm dropping by with red beans and rice in 20. Don't argue. Wouldn't dream of it. And Sam, turn your phone off for the night if you need to. You don't owe anyone an answer while you're bleeding. She hung up before I could ruin it with thanks. I got up, filled a glass with water, and stood at the sink sipping while the late sun threw gold onto the tile. In the window I could see my reflection, older than I feel on good days, exactly my age on bad ones, and right now something in between. The phone buzzed again. I let it. It buzzed 3 more times before I picked it up and read Grace. I messed up. Grace, he left. Are you happy? Grace, please talk to me. Grace, if you cared, you'd answer. Grace, I can't breathe. I can't think. The messages stacked like sandbags against a flood of panic she wanted me to wade into. I typed, I'm not ready to talk tonight, then deleted it. Typed, I love you but I need space, and deleted that too. Some words invite arguments. Silence can be a boundary when you've got no other fence to lean on. When Victoria arrived, she let herself in with her elbow, carrying a Tupperware like a nurse carries medicine. She looked around my living room, saw the neatness that means a man is holding himself together by lining up what he can control, and said nothing about it. She put the beans on the stove, warmed them until the room smelled like Mondays in safety, and fixed me a plate without asking how much I wanted. Some love is efficient. We ate at the table where the gift sat between us, like a question neither of us tried to answer. She tapped the lid. You keeping this? For now, I said. It cost me too much to give it away tonight. We didn't talk about Grace until the plates were clean. When we did, it was like pulling a splinter, fast, steady, no detours. She texted. I said, passing her the phone. Victoria read, her mouth set. She's turning the wheel, she said, begging, then blaming, then drowning. I almost replied. Good thing almost is still a kind of no. I leaned back. What do I say when I do answer? Start with nothing you'll have to take back. I'll talk when I'm ready. I need time. The truth is short, Samuel. Lies need paragraphs. I laughed then, a small crack thing that surprised us both. You should have been the lawyer. I'm the preacher, she said, and patted my hand. Just without the church. When she left, the apartment felt less lonely and more mine. I washed the plates, dried them, stacked them. I put the red beans in the fridge, with a note that said Tuesday. I turned the phone face down on the table and went to bed while the last light was still arguing with the dark. Sleep came in pieces, a patchwork of half-dreams. I saw Grace at 6, her missing front tooth. The way she'd hold her breath before blowing out birthday candles, like she was making a promise to herself nobody else could hear. I saw her at 12, clutching Marilyn's scarf and refusing to cry in church because she said she'd be strong for me. I saw her at 28, eyes cold and mouth beautiful, raising a glass to the chosen family that didn't include the man who chose her every day of his life. I woke before dawn, the room a soft gray. For a minute, I didn't remember why my chest felt like someone had pressed a book heavy as the Bible on it. Then the night slid back into place, and I breathed around it. The phone screen lit the dark when I touched it. For more messages. Grace, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Grace, I said awful things because I was scared you'd ruin it. Grace, I need you to help me fix this. Grace, please pick up. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, feet on the rug I bought with overtime from the hotel. I'd been fixing things for 40 years. Appliances, schedules, budgets, nightmares. It's what good fathers do. But some things don't fix, they mend. That takes 2 sets of hands and thread made from truth. I showered, shaved, and dressed in a clean polo and jeans. I made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. The morning through my window was blue and forgiving. I drank my cup slow, then poured the rest into a thermos. I wrote a note for myself on the pad by the phone. Move your body. Touch the sun. Do one kind thing for a stranger. When a man loses the map he's been using for decades, he has to draw a smaller one for the day. On my way down the stairs, I ran into Mr. Dupree, my neighbor, carrying a sack of groceries that looked too heavy for the narrow man he'd become. "Morning, Sam," he said. "Morning." I took the bag without asking and walked it to his door. "You heard the news?" he asked, fumbling his keys. "About that wedding fiasco." I smiled without showing teeth. Rumors move faster than the streetcar. "I'm sorry, son," he said, calling me son though he's 10 years older than me. "Folk will show you who they are. Keep what you showed us." I nodded. "Yes, sir." When I reached the sidewalk, my phone vibrated again. A different number this time, Atlanta area code. "Theodore, I won't bother you after this, but if you ever want to talk, or if you need anything, you have my number. Take care of yourself, Mr. Everett." I typed 2 words, "You too." Then I slipped the phone into my pocket and started walking toward Armstrong Park, where the oaks hold their arms over the paths the way elders hold a blessing over your head. At the gate, I bought a bottle of water from a vendor I know. "Hot one coming," he said. "They always do," I said. "We just meet them at the door." I sat on a bench and watched the morning fill with people who had their own weights to carry, joggers, a woman pushing a stroller, a sax player practicing scales that wandered and then settled like a flock. I took my thermos out and poured a little coffee into the cap for the pigeons, who didn't care for it, then laughed at myself for offering bitterness to creatures who only wanted crumbs. By 10 o'clock, I'd walked 3 long loops and nodded to the same people enough times to feel like a routine had been born. Routine is a kind of mercy. Back at home, I found the courage to answer at last. Not the way Grace wanted, but the way I could live with. "Me, I'm safe. I need time. I'll reach out when I'm ready." I hit send. No sermon. No history. Just enough truth to stand on. The reply landed in seconds. "Grace, okay. Just that. No pleading. No blame." The smallest word in the English language, and somehow the most complicated when it's honest. I set the phone down, exhaled, and turned to the sink where the last of last night's water glasses waited. I washed it slow, careful not to chip the rim. Some things you handle gentle even when they're only glass. Some things you finally put away. The next few days passed like slow-moving rain clouds, heavy, quiet, always threatening to open up again. Every morning I'd wake before sunrise, make coffee, and sit by the window watching the first streetcar glide down the tracks on Rampart Street. The city was alive, but I wasn't part of its rhythm yet. I was floating above it, trying to remember what life felt like before humiliation had a seat at my table. Grace didn't text for 3 days after that simple okay. It was both a relief and a hollow space that echoed too loud. I tried to fill it with chores, sweeping the balcony, fixing a loose hinge on the bathroom door, organizing old photographs that had been gathering dust in a shoebox under my bed. Each photo was a small universe of memory. There was one of her on her first day of kindergarten, ribbons in her hair, eyes wide and bright. Another of her at 16, holding up her acceptance letter from Spelman College like a golden ticket. And there was one I could barely look at, her and Marilyn at the zoo, both laughing, cotton candy on their hands, sunlight bouncing off their faces. I put that one aside, not because I didn't want to see it, but because the love in it hurt too much to hold. Around noon that third day, I got a call from Victoria. "You sound restless," she said without even saying hello. "Yes, I am," I replied. "Can't sit still, can't move forward, don't know what to do with myself." "Then come down here," she said. "Help me sort the donations at the church pantry. We could use another pair of hands." I hesitated. "You sure you want me there? You know folks will talk. Half the congregation's probably already replaying what happened at the wedding like it's some soap opera." "Let them," she said. "You need to stop hiding from people. You didn't do anything wrong, Sam." She was right. Shame has a way of making even the innocent seek corners to disappear in. So I got dressed, pulled on a clean white shirt, and walked down to New Hope Baptist Church, the same church where I'd buried Marilyn 22 years earlier. The moment I stepped inside, I smelled the familiar mix of floor polish, coffee, and old hymnals. The fellowship hall was full of boxes, canned goods, clothes, toys, and the sound of chatter. Victoria was at the center, directing traffic like a general with a clipboard. "Look who decided to rejoin the living," she called out when she saw me. A few heads turned. Some smiled politely. Others offered quiet nods. I smiled back and rolled up my sleeves. "Where you want me?" "Stack those canned goods over by the kitchen door," she said. "And don't start alphabetizing them like last time. This isn't a grocery store." For the next few hours, I worked without thinking too much. The rhythm of lifting, sorting, and stacking gave my hands something to do while my mind drifted. I listened to the laughter of the volunteers, most of them older women from the neighborhood, and felt something I hadn't felt since before the wedding: belonging. During lunch break, Victoria sat beside me on a bench outside. "You're quieter than usual," she said, passing me a sandwich wrapped in foil. "Just tired," I lied. Then after a moment, "V, you ever feel like life handed you an exam you already took and failed once?" She looked at me, chewing slowly. "You mean Grace?" I nodded. "Maybe this ain't another exam," she said. "Maybe it's your retake, but this time you get to answer differently." I smiled. "You always did think in sermons. And you always need to hear them," she said. We ate in silence for a while. Then she said, "You should talk to somebody besides me. A counselor, maybe. The church has one who volunteers twice a week." I shook my head. "I've spent my life talking to God. That's enough counseling for me." "Sam, God listens, but sometimes he sends professionals to help him out," she said, and chuckled softly. Her laughter loosened something in me. "Maybe I'll think about it," I said, though I didn't mean it yet. When I got home that evening, the apartment didn't feel as heavy. I microwaved leftovers, sat by the window again, and for the first time noticed the beauty of the sunset, the way it painted the old rooftops in orange and gold. I could almost hear Marilyn saying, "See, baby? God's still working on the sky, even after the storm." Then my phone buzzed. "Grace, Dad, can we talk? Just for a few minutes. Please." I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the screen. Every instinct screamed to protect myself, but another voice, quieter and older, whispered, "You can't heal what you refuse to face." I typed back, "Me. I'm not ready for a long talk, but I can listen." Her reply came almost instantly. "Grace, thank you. I don't even know where to start." "Me. Start where it hurts." There was a pause. Then, "Grace, it hurts everywhere." She called before I could reply. I let it ring twice, then answered. Her voice trembled, softer than I remembered. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I can't sleep. I keep hearing what I said, seeing your face when I told you to leave." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said. "It's like I've been living a lie, pretending to be this perfect woman when really I'm just scared and angry all the time. And when Theo looked at me last week, when he said he couldn't marry me, I realized I'd become everything I used to hate. Her voice cracked, and for a second, I almost broke. But I remembered Victoria's words. This time you answer differently. Grace, I said, my voice steady. The first step toward fixing a broken thing is seeing that it's broken. You done that. That's a start. I want to see you, she whispered. Please, just to talk. Not yet, I said gently. We both need time. You've got to sit with what happened a while longer. Let it teach you. I don't want to lose you too, she said. You already lost me once, I said softly. What you do next decides if you find me again. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, okay, barely above a whisper. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the dark window. My reflection looked like my father's, steady, lined, but alive. I whispered, thank you, Lord. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had shifted. The next morning, I woke before dawn again, but this time I had a plan. I dressed, made coffee, and caught the bus to the riverfront where the French market was waking up. I'd heard a man there, Mr. Henderson, a retired teacher, ran a small volunteer group helping seniors with errands. I asked around until I found him, a tall man with silver hair and a smile like sunrise. You Samuel Everett? He asked after I introduced myself. Heard of you. You're Grace Carter's daddy, right? The name stung, but I nodded. That's me. Well, we can always use hands like yours. We deliver groceries, fix small repairs, sit with folks who just need company. That last part, I said. I can do that. And that's how it began, without ceremony, without fanfare. Just a man who'd lost his place in one story, stepping quietly into another. That afternoon, we visited a widow named Miss Loretta who lived alone in a tiny shotgun house with peeling paint. She'd lost her husband last winter and hadn't been out much since. I fixed her loose door hinge, changed a light bulb, and listened while she told me stories about how she used to sing at Preservation Hall when she was young. When I left, she pressed a small bag of cookies into my hand. For your kindness, she said. On the way home, I thought of something I hadn't thought in years. Maybe love doesn't die. It just changes its address. That night, as I sat on the balcony eating Miss Loretta's cookies, my phone buzzed again. Grace, I started therapy today. The counselor's name is Dr. Jones. She said I need to face my pride and my guilt. I wanted you to know. For the first time since that awful night, I smiled without forcing it. Me, I'm proud of you. Keep going. The reply came after a minute. Grace, thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me completely. I looked out at the city lights and whispered to the air. I never did. And maybe, for the first time, I actually believed it. The morning after Grace's message felt different. Not lighter exactly, but less suffocating. For the first time in weeks, I didn't wake up with that weight pressing against my ribs. There was still sadness, sure, but also something else, space. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat by the window, letting the steam fog the glass. Outside, the street was alive with the familiar hum of Treme mornings, vendors calling out for beignet and coffee, kids chasing each other to school, and an old trumpet drifting somewhere nearby, playing a lazy blues that matched my mood. As I took my first sip, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I thought about ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. Mr. Everett? A voice said, warm and familiar. Yes, speaking. This is Theodore Carter. For a moment, I didn't say anything. His name was still tangled with the memory of that night. The microphone, the silence, the truth ripping open in front of everyone. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he continued. I just needed to talk to you about something important. It's all right, son, I said. You caught me mid-coffee, not mid-crisis. What's on your mind? He laughed softly, but it was a tired laugh. I've been thinking about what happened, about how fast everything fell apart. I can't stop replaying it, not because I regret telling the truth, but because I keep thinking about what comes after. For you, for her, for me. I stayed quiet. He went on. I moved back to Atlanta for now. Needed some distance. But before I left, I visited your sister. She told me about the work she does at the church pantry and how you've been helping there. She also mentioned you were good with your hands and even better with people. Victoria exaggerates, I said, though I felt a flicker of pride. She said you're someone who listens, he replied, and that's rare these days. That's why I called. He paused, then asked, would you consider helping me with something? A project. A project. I'm starting something new here. It's still small, just an idea right now. I want to create a community center for older women, especially those who've spent their lives taking care of others and now find themselves alone or overlooked. The world doesn't talk about them enough. I saw it with you, Mr. Everett. How much love and sacrifice gets erased once people stop needing it. I think about my own mother, my grandmother, the women who raised me. They gave everything, and now some of them don't even have company on holidays. His words landed soft, but deep. What would you need me for? I asked. Guidance, he said simply. Wisdom. Someone who understands what it means to carry people on your back for years. I can design buildings. I can get permits and investors. But what I don't know is how to build a home for the spirit. You do. I let out a long breath. I don't know about all that. I'm just a tired man with good intentions. That's exactly the kind of man I need, he said. Think about it. No rush. I'll send you the proposal next week. We hung up, but his words stayed with me like an aftertaste I couldn't shake. A community center. A place for women who'd given everything and gotten so little back. Maybe that was what the world needed. More places where love could rest. When I told Victoria later that day, she grinned like she'd already known. See there? God wastes nothing, she said. He's recycling your pain into purpose. I rolled my eyes. You sound like one of your Sunday devotionals. Because it's true, she said, pointing her finger like she was preaching. You needed something to do that wasn't fixing broken hinges and carrying groceries. You needed a mission. I didn't argue, but I didn't say yes either. I wanted to think. That night, I walked to Louis Armstrong Park again. The lights shimmered on the water, and I could hear a street performer playing, A Change Is Gonna Come. That song always felt like a prayer to me. Hope wrapped in sorrow, faith hanging by a note. I sat on a bench and thought about Theodore's offer. About grace. About what it means to start over when you've already lived more years than you've got left. Marilyn's voice came to me then, as clear as if she were sitting beside me. Samuel Everett, you were born to lift others. That's why God gave you those big hands and that stubborn heart. I closed my eyes and whispered to the night, all right, baby. I hear you. The next morning, I called Theodore back. Tell me more about that project, I said. He sounded relieved. I was hoping you'd say that. We spent nearly an hour on the phone. He explained his vision in detail. A center called the New Dawn Project, focused on empowering older women, providing workshops, therapy, and spaces where they could connect and heal. I don't just want charity, he said. I want restoration, dignity. I can help with that, I said. Dignity's been my field of study for 68 years. He laughed, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt real warmth in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Theodore sent plans and drafts. He asked my opinion on everything from the layout of the rooms to the kind of programs we should offer. You've been around people long enough to know what makes them stay, he said. I found myself looking forward to our calls. They gave me purpose, structure. Even Victoria noticed. You walk different now, she said one afternoon as we stacked boxes at the pantry. Like a man who's found something to stand on again. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I just stopped standing in the same spot waiting for forgiveness. You'll get that too, she said. But it's better when it comes after you already forgave yourself. That night, I sat at my kitchen table sketching ideas for the center. A small garden for reflection. A reading nook. A room for crafts and music. I could already see it filled with laughter and conversation, with women rediscovering their worth. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet thought rose. Maybe this is what healing looks like, not forgetting, but using the pain to build something new. Then my phone buzzed again. Grace, I heard about the project from Aunt Victoria. She said you're working with Theo. That's amazing, Dad. I'm proud of you. I smiled, shaking my head. Victoria couldn't keep a secret if it came with a padlock. Me, it's still early days. Nothing's built yet. Grace, still, it's something beautiful. I hope one day I can help too. Her words were simple, but they hit harder than any apology. For the first time, she wasn't the center of the story. She was looking outward, admiring something I was doing, not needing something from me. I didn't reply right away. I let the quiet stretch between us, not as a wall, but as a bridge still under construction. That night I dreamed of a building full of sunlight, women laughing, and Grace standing at the doorway, not as a lost child, but as someone ready to learn. When I woke up, I whispered a small prayer I hadn't said in years. Lord, don't let this peace be temporary. And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed he might just listen. The first time I stepped into the empty building that would become the new Dawn Center, sunlight poured through cracked windows like it had been waiting years to do its job. The place had good bones, a wide main hall, high ceilings, and a courtyard in the back overtaken by weeds, but still breathing. Theodore met me there, rolled up blueprints under one arm and hope shining off him like sweat. Needs a little love, he said, looking around. I chuckled. Son, this building needs resurrection. He laughed. Then we're in the right line of work. Over the next few weeks, the place became our project, our purpose. I wasn't an architect like him, but I'd spent my life fixing things with my hands, and he knew enough to listen when experience spoke. We cleaned out debris, tore down old panels, patched cracks, and dreamed out loud between hammer strikes. This room, Theodore said one morning, pointing at what used to be an office, will be for therapy sessions. Privacy, good lighting, soft chairs. I want women to feel safe here. I nodded. And that back area, turn it into a community kitchen. Nothing brings folks together like cooking. He grinned. You sound like my grandmother. She must have been wise. She was, he said quietly. She raised me after my mama passed. I guess this center is partly for her too. We worked until sundown most days, our conversations ranging from family to faith to the music of our youth. We played Coltrane, Aretha, Sam Cooke on an old speaker while we painted, and sometimes the neighbors would peek in, asking what we were building. A place for new beginnings, Theodore always said. And every time he said it, I believed him more. By the end of the first month, we had volunteers, mostly women from the church, and a few retired men looking for purpose. One of them, Miss Evelyn, a 70-year-old with sharp eyes and a cane that doubled as a command stick, became our unofficial forewoman. Don't paint over those windows, she ordered one afternoon. Sunlight is healing. Leave it be. Yes, ma'am, Theodore said, laughing, wiping paint off his cheek. She pointed at me next. And you, Mr. Everett, quit working through lunch. Ain't nobody gonna thank you if you faint. I saluted her. Yes, ma'am. It felt good, being part of something bigger than pain. Each nail driven, each wall repainted, seemed to hammer my heart back into place a little more. One afternoon, Victoria showed up carrying a tray of cornbread and enough iced tea for an army. Can't have men working without nourishment, she declared, handing out cups. And I came to see if my brother's actually doing something besides talking. Talking's part of the job, Theodore said with a grin. I've known Samuel 68 years. If talking built buildings, he'd be mayor of New Orleans by now. Everyone laughed, including me. For once, laughter didn't feel like a stranger. Later that evening, after the others had left, Theodore and I sat on the front steps, watching the streetlights flicker on. The air smelled like rain, and somewhere nearby a saxophone was crying through an open window. You ever think about what happens when it's finished? Theodore asked. I shrugged. We opened the doors. Let life walk in. He looked down at his hands. I mean for you, Mr. Everett. What do you want out of all this? I took a long breath. Purpose. That's it. For a long time, everything I did was for my daughter. Then she didn't need me no more, and I forgot who I was without that need. Maybe this place is how I remember. He nodded slowly. Then let's build a memory that lasts. A few days later, Grace texted me again. Grace, Aunt Victoria told me the renovations are going well. I'd love to come by sometime to help. I stared at the message for a long while. I could picture her walking in nervous, maybe, carrying all that guilt she hadn't finished unpacking yet. Me one day soon, maybe. Not yet. Grace, I understand. I'll wait until you're ready. I appreciated that she didn't push. That was new. The old Grace would have shown up anyway, expecting forgiveness like a right. This Grace was learning to wait. A week later, the city inspectors came to evaluate the building. One of them, a stern woman with glasses, walked through with a clipboard, making notes. When she was done, she said, "It's in better shape than I expected. You two did good work." Theodore and I exchanged a look of relief. She smiled faintly. "You'll need funding soon. Projects like this don't run on elbow grease alone." She was right, of course. That night, Theodore and I sat in my apartment eating takeout gumbo and going through the numbers. "I've got some savings," he said, "and a few investors who might be interested if we can prove there's real impact. And I've got a sister who can talk a church into anything," I added. We both laughed, but we knew this was the hard part. The dream was easy, sustaining it wasn't. "Maybe we organize a fundraiser," I suggested. "Something that brings the community out. Music, food, testimonies." Theodore nodded. "A celebration of what's coming, not just what's built." Within days, Victoria had recruited half the congregation to help. Flyers went up across Treme and the lower ninth. Local musicians offered to play for free. Miss Evelyn volunteered to cook. Even the neighborhood kids promised to help set up tables. It felt like something alive was growing, like the city itself was rooting for us. The night before the fundraiser, I got another text from Grace. "Grace, I saw the flyer online. The New Dawn Project. That's beautiful, Dad. I'm happy for you." "Me, thank you, baby." "Grace, I mean it. You deserve to be seen for who you are." Those words sat with me all night. You deserve to be seen. That was all I'd wanted, all I'd prayed for that morning of her wedding. It had taken the worst night of my life for her to finally understand it. The next day, the fundraiser overflowed with people, families, elders, old musicians, and kids running between tables. Theodore stood at the mic, introducing the project, explaining the vision, and when it was my turn to speak, I froze for a second, looking at all those faces. I thought of Marilyn, of the long nights, the heartbreak, the forgiveness that had taken years to find. And I said, "This place isn't about charity. It's about dignity. It's about giving people back the part of themselves that life forgot to return. We're building walls here, sure, but more than that, we're building hope." The applause came like thunder, and for the first time in decades, I didn't shy away from it. I stood there and let it wash over me, not as pride, but as proof that maybe pain could be repurposed into light. Afterward, as the band started to play, Victoria wrapped an arm around me. "Look at you, Mr. Purpose," she teased. "Guess you were right," I said. "I usually am," she said, grinning. As the night wound down, I caught sight of a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd, Grace. She hadn't come close, just stood watching, her hands clasped, eyes shining. When our gazes met, she gave me a small, nervous wave. I didn't go to her, but I didn't look away either. I nodded once, slow and steady. She smiled a quiet, humble smile, and turned to leave. And just like that, I realized something simple and profound. Maybe healing wasn't about fixing what broke. Maybe it was about learning to walk alongside the cracks without tripping. That night, when I got home, I wrote in my journal for the first time since Marilyn died. The world doesn't end when your heart breaks. Sometimes, that's when it finally begins to beat for real. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of loss. By the start of autumn, the New Dawn Center no longer looked like a forgotten building. It looked like a promise. The walls gleamed with a fresh coat of cream paint. The windows caught the morning light, and the scent of sawdust was slowly giving way to coffee and clean floors. Every day, the place filled a little more with laughter, plans, and the sound of women reclaiming their voices. But even dreams need money to stay alive. The fundraiser had covered only a portion of what we needed. After the applause faded and the chairs were folded away, reality sat down beside me and whispered the truth. We were still $10,000 short of completing the final phase, furnishings, supplies, and a small emergency fund for the first few months. Theodore tried to stay optimistic, but I could see the strain in his eyes during our meetings. "We'll find a way," he kept saying, flipping through his spreadsheets. "People believe in this, Sam. We just have to remind them why." He was right, of course. Belief was our strongest currency. But belief didn't pay utility bills or buy therapy chairs. One Tuesday morning, I sat in the community kitchen drinking coffee when Miss Evelyn came in with her cane tapping against the tile. "You got that face again," she said. "What face?" "The one that says you're doing math in your head and losing." I laughed despite myself. "We're just short a bit, that's all." She sat across from me and leaned in. "You ever think maybe you're supposed to let people help you?" "I'm letting them," I said. "They're already giving their time." "I'm not talking about time, sugar. I'm talking about trusting that the same way you gave grace to your daughter, God will give some back to you. Maybe not through her, but through somebody." Her words sat heavy but gentle, like a hand on my shoulder. Miss Evelyn was right. I'd been so used to being the giver that I didn't know how to be the receiver. That same afternoon, Theodore called me into his office, a small room still cluttered with blueprints and coffee cups. "Got some news," he said, waving a letter. "The city approved our nonprofit status." I blinked. Already? He grinned. "That means we can apply for grants now. Real ones." It felt like a door had opened, just a crack, but enough to let the light in. We spent the next few weeks filling out applications, gathering letters of support, and meeting with community leaders. Victoria helped draft proposals, and Miss Evelyn made sure every visitor left with a full stomach and a smile. During that time, Grace texted a few times, short messages, polite check-ins. "Grace, Aunt Victoria posted photos of the center. It looks beautiful." "Me, we're getting there." "Grace, I'd love to donate something, if that's okay." I hesitated before replying. "Me, you don't owe me anything, Grace." "Grace, I know. That's why I want to." A week later, an envelope arrived at the center addressed to Mr. Samuel Everett. Inside was a handwritten note and a check for $500. The handwriting was careful, almost childlike. "Dad, I can't undo what I said that night, but maybe this can help someone else find peace sooner than I did. Love, Grace." I read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope and tucked it into my coat pocket. Money was money, but that note? That was something else. That night, I walked home under the glow of the streetlights, the city humming soft blues all around me. I stopped by St. Augustine Church, pushed the gate open, and sat on the front steps. "Lord," I whispered, "I don't know what you're doing, but I see you." 2 days later, Theodore called with excitement buzzing in his voice. "We got it." "Got what?" "The community grant from the Orleans Women's Foundation. $10,000, Sam. We're funded." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I laughed, a real laugh, deep and unguarded. "You serious?" "As a heart attack." They said the project represents everything they stand for: resilience, second chances, and respect for our elders. I hung up and sat there in silence, overwhelmed. I thought of every woman who would walk through those doors, every story of loneliness and quiet strength that would finally have a place to rest. The following weeks were a blur of activity. New chairs arrived, fresh curtains went up, and volunteers painted a mural in the main hall, a sunrise stretching across the wall, bold and bright. Victoria supervised the final touches, fussing over every flower arrangement like she was decorating heaven itself. "Openings next month," Theodore said one evening, checking his notes. "You ready for your speech?" I groaned. "Don't remind me." He laughed. "You're better at speaking than you think. People listen when you talk, Sam. You make them feel seen." "That's because I know what it's like to be invisible," I said quietly. He nodded, and for a moment we both sat in understanding. That night I called Grace. It was time. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, hey baby. Everything okay?" "More than okay," I said. "We got the funding. The center's almost ready to open." She let out a soft gasp. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." Her voice cracked a little, and for a second I could hear the girl she used to be. The one who'd climb into my lap after scraping her knee. The one who believed I could fix anything. "I wanted you to know," I said. "And I got your note. Thank you." "You deserve that," she whispered. "You've always deserved more than I gave." "Grace," I said, "we can't rewrite what's been done, but we can start a new chapter if we want to." "Do you want that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I do, but not as the man who raised you, as the man you can get to know now. Samuel Everett, the one who builds things and sometimes burns his cornbread." She laughed through her tears. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd really like that." When we hung up, I sat there for a long while, staring out at the city lights. I didn't know if we'd ever be the same again, but maybe that was the point. Maybe love wasn't about returning to what you were. It was about growing into what you could be. 2 weeks later, the new Dawn Center officially opened its doors. The ceremony was small but full of joy. Women from the neighborhood came dressed in their Sunday best. Volunteers brought homemade dishes, and a brass band played softly outside. Theodore gave a speech first, his voice steady and proud. "This center belongs to every woman who has ever been told she's too old, too tired, or too invisible to matter. You matter." Then he handed me the microphone. I looked out at the crowd, faces lined with years, eyes full of hope, and said, "All my life, I believed my worth depended on who needed me. My daughter, my job, my family. But I learned something here. Worth doesn't disappear when people stop asking for your help. It lives inside you, waiting for you to notice it again." The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was sincere. The kind that fills a room from the inside out. After the speeches, while people mingled, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was. Grace. She stood just a few feet away, nervous, but smiling. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "You were incredible." I smiled. "You came." I had to see it for myself. She looked around the room, eyes shining. "It's beautiful." "Yeah," I said quietly. "It really is." And for the first time since that wedding, when she looked at me, I didn't see shame or pride or guilt. I saw love, quiet, trembling, honest love trying to find its footing again. That was enough. For now. The morning after the grand opening, I woke up before dawn, the kind of quiet hour when the city still holds its breath. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of coffee in my hands, and stared at the folded newspaper that someone had slipped under my door. A new dawn for Treme. Community Center brings hope to forgotten women. My name was there in black and white, Samuel Everett, co-founder. I ran my fingers over the ink. I wasn't used to being written about. For so long, I'd been background noise, someone's father, someone's brother, someone's helper. Now I was something else. Not famous, not special, but seen. By 8 a.m., I was at the center. The building was quiet, sunlight spilling through the glass doors, reflecting off the mural of the rising sun. Theodore was already in his office, talking on the phone with a donor. Miss Evelyn was in the kitchen, making her famous biscuits for the volunteers. "Morning, Mr. Everett," she said when she saw me. "You look like a man who finally slept through the night." "Close enough," I said with a smile. "You made those biscuits for me?" "I made them for whoever shows up early enough to deserve him," she said, handing me one still warm. We shared breakfast at the big wooden table, the kind we'd rescued from a storage lot and polished until it shined like memory. Halfway through our meal, Victoria walked in, her face pale and her movements hurried. My sister never looked like that unless something was wrong. I said, standing up. "What happened?" She clutched her phone tight, her voice trembling. "It's Theodore. He just got off the phone with the hospital. His grandmother, Miss Lillian, passed away early this morning." The room fell silent. Miss Evelyn set down her teacup slowly. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. I sat down again, the weight of the news pressing on my chest. I'd never met Miss Lillian, but I'd heard plenty about her. She'd raised Theodore after his mother died, worked as a nurse for 40 years, and still volunteered at her church every Sunday until her health began to fail. When Theodore came out of his office a few minutes later, I could see the loss written all over him. He looked smaller somehow, like the gravity of grief was trying to pull him into the floor. "I'm so sorry, son," I said, pulling him into a hug. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "She was the reason I wanted to build this place, Mr. Everett. I wanted her to see it before she went." "She did," I said softly. "Maybe not with her eyes, but with her spirit. She saw it long before we did." He nodded, blinking fast. "The funeral's in Baton Rouge this weekend. I'll need to go tomorrow." "We'll hold things down here," I assured him. When he left, the center felt different, quieter, slower, like even the walls were mourning with us. I gathered the volunteers and told them what happened. Everyone agreed to keep working in his honor that week. By noon, the place was humming again, women in the sewing room stitching quilts, others arranging books in the reading corner. But beneath the activity was a shared tenderness, a reminder that even joy needs space for sorrow. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind. I walked through the halls, turning off lights, checking locks, letting the echo of footsteps follow me like a gentle companion. When I reached the mural of the sunrise, I stopped and traced the painted rays with my fingers. I thought of Theodore and Miss Lillian. I thought of Grace. And I thought of all the women who'd given love until it wore them thin. "Rest easy, Miss Lillian," I whispered. "We'll take it from here." The next morning, Grace called. "Dad," she said softly, "I read about Miss Lillian in the paper. I wanted to say I'm sorry. She sounded like a wonderful woman." "She was," I said. "Theodore's taking it hard." "I can imagine." There was a pause. "Do you think I should reach out to him?" I hesitated. "Not yet. Give him space to grieve before you bring old wounds into it. When the time's right, he'll let you know." "You're right," she said. "I'll wait." We talked for a few more minutes, small things, light things. But even small talk can carry a kind of grace. That weekend, Victoria and I drove to Baton Rouge for the funeral. The church was packed. Nurses in white uniforms, neighbors, family, even some of the women from our center. The choir sang "His Eye is on the Sparrow," and by the time the pastor finished his eulogy, half the room was crying. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't plan to, but Theodore asked me to say a few words. I stood at the pulpit and looked out at all those faces, each one carrying their own story of loss. "I didn't know Miss Lillian long," I began, "but I know the kind of man she raised. And when you know the fruit, you understand the tree. This center we built, it's as much her legacy as his. She taught him how to love people with his hands, and he's been passing that on ever since." When I sat down, Theodore squeezed my shoulder, his eyes red but grateful. After the service, we stood outside the church, watching the sun sink behind the cypress trees. "She would have loved your speech," he said. "I just told the truth," I replied. He smiled faintly. "I'm heading back to New Orleans tomorrow. I don't want to lose momentum." I nodded. That's what she'd want. When we returned, the center welcomed us like a living thing. The volunteers had decorated Miss Lillian's photo with candles and flowers. A sign above it read, "In loving memory, a life that taught us how to begin again." For the next few days, we hosted grief support sessions for women who'd lost loved ones. It was Theodore's idea, but I ran them when he couldn't. Each story reminded me that healing isn't a straight line, it's a circle. Pain comes back around, but so does hope. One afternoon, as I was sweeping the hall, Grace showed up unexpectedly. She looked different, simpler. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, just jeans and a soft blue sweater. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, standing in the doorway. "I just wanted to drop something off." She handed me a small box. Inside was a framed photo, me, her, and Marilyn from years ago, at the city park. We were laughing, ice cream melting down our hands. "I found it when I was cleaning out my closets," she said. "I thought maybe it belonged here, somewhere in the center." I swallowed hard. That's a good idea." She smiled shyly. "Maybe it'll remind people that family doesn't always look perfect, but it's still worth fighting for." "Yeah," I said softly. "It will." After she left, I placed the photo on a shelf near the mural, where the morning light hit it just right. I stood there a long time, looking at the frozen joy of a day long gone, but not forgotten. And as the sun poured through the windows, I realized something simple and sacred. Grief and grace are twins. One teaches you how to hold on. The other teaches you when to let go. That night, when I locked the center and walked home, I whispered into the cool New Orleans air, "Thank you, Miss Lillian. Thank you for teaching us how to begin again." By the time October rolled around, the New Dawn Center was fully alive. The mornings filled with the chatter of women trading recipes, laughter spilling down the halls, and the sound of chairs scraping across the tile as classes began. The building had a pulse now, steady, warm, human. We had programs running 6 days a week. Financial literacy on Mondays, art therapy on Tuesdays, support circles on Wednesdays, and community meals every Friday. It was working. Women who'd once walked in with slumped shoulders now smiled freely, some even volunteering to help others. I watched them rediscover themselves the way I had, one small act of faith at a time. But success has a way of bringing its own set of storms. It started with a letter, an official-looking envelope that arrived one afternoon while Theodore and I were reviewing next month's schedule. The return address read, City Department of Development and Planning. He frowned. "This doesn't look like a thank you note." He tore it open, scanned the first page, and let out a slow, deep sigh. "You're not gonna like this, Sam." "What is it?" "The city's reviewing zoning permits. Some developer wants to buy the block." He tossed the papers onto the desk. "If it goes through, we might be forced to relocate." I stared at the letter, the words blurring for a second. "Relocate? We just built this place. It's ours." "I know," he said, "but the city's eyeing this neighborhood for revitalization projects. That usually means they push out the folks who actually made it worth saving." The anger in his voice mirrored my own. Treme had always been a target for that kind of revitalization. They called it progress. We called it erasure. What can we do? I asked. "We've got 30 days to submit a case for exemption," Theodore said, scanning the fine print. "If we can prove we're providing essential community services, they'll have to consider leaving us alone." I leaned back, rubbing my temples. "So we fight." He nodded. "We fight." For the next few days, the center turned into a war room. Victoria rallied volunteers, Miss Evelyn drafted petitions, and Theodore wrote appeal letters. I went door to door in the neighborhood, talking to shop owners, pastors, and families who'd seen what the center was doing. By the end of the week, we had over 200 signatures of support. But bureaucracy doesn't move with the same heart as a community. At the city hearing 2 weeks later, we sat in a cold room that smelled faintly of dust and politics. The panel of officials looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Theodore presented our case, calmly, professionally, while I watched the faces of men and women who hadn't set foot in Treme in years. When he finished, the lead commissioner adjusted her glasses and said, "We appreciate your passion, Mr. Carter. However, redevelopment plans have already been set in motion. We'll review your documentation, but I can't make promises." Promises. That word always sounded cheap when it came from people in power. Afterward, we stepped outside into the sunlight. Theodore kicked at a crack in the sidewalk. "We're not giving up. We'll make noise if we have to." "Noise I can do," I said, my jaw tight. That evening, we organized a neighborhood rally in the courtyard. Musicians came with their trumpets and drums, kids painted protest signs, and women from the center stood at the microphone sharing what New Dawn meant to them. Miss Evelyn's voice trembled but never broke. "This isn't just a building," she said. "It's proof that we're still here, still standing, still loving, still matter." The crowd roared. For one night, Treme remembered its power. Grace came too. I hadn't expected her, but there she was, in jeans and a denim jacket, holding a sign that read community over condos. When our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. Later, when the speeches ended and the crowd began to thin, she walked over. "I wanted to help," she said. "You already did," I told her. "I meant help with the petition, the paperwork, whatever you need." I studied her face. She looked calmer, more grounded than I'd seen her in years. "You sure about that? It's hard work, and there's no spotlight at the end." She smiled faintly. "That's the point." So she joined us. Over the next week, Grace worked alongside us, sorting documents, making calls, and sitting in long meetings without complaint. The volunteers liked her. Miss Evelyn called her the daughter who came home. I didn't correct her. One evening, after the others had left, Grace and I sat together in the now quiet center. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and old wood. "Dad," she said softly, "I never realized how much work goes into something like this." "Nothing worth keeping ever comes easy," I said. She nodded, then hesitated. "I've been thinking about Grandma a lot lately, about how she used to say that love without service is just decoration." I smiled. She said that all the time. Drove me crazy back then. "She was right, though," Grace whispered. "I've spent most of my life decorating. Maybe it's time to start serving." Her words hit deeper than she knew. "You already started," I said. "Just keep walking." The following week, we received another letter from a city. My hand shook as I opened it. Theodore stood beside me, silent. It wasn't a full victory, but it was something. The New Dawn Center was granted a temporary exemption for 1 year while the city conducted further review. We had 12 months to prove our worth. When I read the final line out loud, the room erupted in cheers. Miss Evelyn started crying. Victoria hugged me so tight I could hardly breathe. Grace looked at me through her own tears. "You did it." "No," I said. "We did it." That night, after everyone had gone home, Theodore and I sat on the steps outside, the streetlights casting soft halos around us. "You ever notice," he said, "that every time life tries to knock this place down, it ends up building it higher?" I nodded. "Yeah, pain's a poor architect, but it builds strong foundations." He laughed, shaking his head. "You should put that on a sign somewhere." When I got home, I found a text from Grace waiting for me. "Grace, thank you for letting me be part of this. I don't know if I'll ever deserve your forgiveness, but I hope I can earn your trust again." I sat there, staring at the message, feeling something soften in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but the soil it grows in. Me, Grace, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something we both learn. She replied only with a heart emoji, but it was enough. That night, I stood by my window, looking out at the glowing city, and realized that everything I'd lost, my pride, my certainty, even my daughter, had been the price of something bigger. The next day, as I opened the center, Miss Evelyn met me at the door with 2 mugs of coffee. "You look peaceful," she said. "I am," I replied. "For once." She smiled. "Don't get too comfortable, baby. Peace never stays still. It's meant to move through you, not live in you." And she was right, because just as I was about to take my first sip, Theodore burst through the doors with a letter in his hand and a look that said the story wasn't over yet. "Sam," he said, breathless, "you need to see this." Theodore handed me the letter like it was a live wire, his hands still trembling from the rush of whatever was inside. "It's from the Department of Cultural Development," he said, breathing hard. "Read it." I tore it open. The letterhead was gold embossed, official and elegant, the kind that usually came with bad news or big opportunities. My eyes skimmed the first few lines, and my heart started pounding before I'd even finished the first paragraph. "The city wants to partner with New Dawn," I murmured. Theodore grinned. "Not just partner, expand. They're offering us a grant to open a second center across town in Gentilly." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. It was the kind of news you dream about, but never expect. "Gentilly," I whispered. "That neighborhood's been struggling since Katrina. Half the lots are still empty." He nodded. "Exactly why they want us there. They said our success here caught their attention. They think New Dawn could be a model for rebuilding communities with dignity instead of just bulldozing them." I looked up from the letter, feeling the weight of it sink in. "So they finally noticed us, huh?" "They noticed you, Sam," Theodore said, his smile softening. "You're the soul of this place." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "Nah, man. The souls and the women who show up every day." Still, the words warmed me. I'd spent decades being overlooked, dismissed, pushed aside. Now the city was coming to me. But as with all blessings, there was fine print. "They need a full proposal by next month," Theodore continued. A budget, staffing plan, projected community impact. All the bureaucratic bells and whistles. It's a lot. I can handle paperwork, I said, though I wasn't sure I could. That's not the only part, he added. They also want a spokesperson, someone to represent New Dawn at the press conference. They specifically asked for you. That stopped me cold. Me? Why not you? You're the architect. You built this. I built the walls, he said quietly. You built the heart. The thought of standing in front of cameras, microphones, strangers in suits, it made my stomach twist. I hadn't spoken publicly since Grace's wedding, and that day had nearly broken me. I don't know, Theo, I murmured. Public speaking ain't exactly my lane. He gave me a look that reminded me of myself when Grace was little, the way I'd look at her before she did something scary but necessary. You've already done the hardest part. The world deserves to hear that story from you. I didn't answer. I just folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my pocket. That evening, I walked home slower than usual, letting the humid breeze of New Orleans wrap around me like an old song. I stopped by the river and sat on one of the benches overlooking the water. The city lights shimmered across the surface, dancing with the ghosts of my past. Marilyn's laughter, Grace's childhood giggles, the silence that had followed for years. Could I really stand up and tell our story? Not as a victim, but as a survivor who found purpose in the ruins? The next day, Grace came by the center again. She'd been volunteering regularly now, and the women had grown fond of her. I found her in the art room, helping Miss Ruby paint wooden birdhouses. When she saw me, she smiled. Hey, Dad. Miss Ruby says my brushstrokes look like a 5-year-old's. Miss Ruby laughed. I said that's a compliment. 5-year-olds don't paint with fear. Grace rolled her eyes playfully and wiped her hands on a rag. What's that letter you've been carrying around all day? I hesitated, then handed it to her. She read it quickly, her eyes widening. Oh my God, they want to expand New Dawn. That's amazing. It is, I said, but they also want me to be the spokesperson. Her grin faded slightly. And that scares you. I shrugged. Talking about myself never brought me anything but pain. She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Maybe because before, you were always defending yourself. This time, you'd be celebrating yourself. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't the same woman who'd once looked through me at her own wedding. There was humility now, and something else too. Quiet strength. Your mother would have loved this, she added. She always believed in what community could do. Her words hit me like a gospel note. Marilyn had been the heartbeat of our block, the one who always cooked extra for the neighbors, who'd say things like, "Service is how you stay human, Sam." Maybe Grace was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind my humility. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked around my apartment, practicing in my head what I might say if I did agree to the press conference. Every version sounded wrong. Too rehearsed, too small, too formal. So I stopped trying to sound right and started trying to sound true. By morning, I'd made my decision. When I arrived at the center, Theodore was waiting in his office, sipping coffee like a man who already knew the answer. "You're gonna do it, aren't you?" he said with a grin. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but on one condition. I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about us. About every woman, every volunteer, every second chance that walked through these doors." He extended his hand. Deal. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of planning. Reporters called, photographers visited, and we polished the center until it gleamed. Grace helped organize testimonials from the women, while Victoria handled logistics. The morning of the press conference, I stood in front of the mirror in my office, straightening my tie. My reflection looked older than I felt. Silver hair, lined face, but there was a steadiness in my eyes I hadn't seen before. "You ready?" Theodore asked from the doorway. "Ready as I'll ever be," I said. The courtyard was packed with reporters, city officials, and community members. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed my way. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. For a second, I froze, the crowd, the lights, the hum of anticipation. But then I spotted Grace standing near the back, smiling through tears, and I found my voice. "When we open New Dawn," I began. We didn't just build a center. We built a home for women who had been told they were too old, too broken, too late to matter. But what I've learned is that it's never too late. Not to start over, not to forgive, not to build something beautiful from the ashes. I saw heads nodding, people wiping their eyes. I went on, speaking from my heart, about pain, about grace, about the community that had saved me as much as I tried to save it. When I finished, the applause was overwhelming. Reporters rushed forward, asking questions, snapping photos. But all I could see was Grace, clapping softly, her eyes shining with something that looked like pride. Not for the man she wished I was, but for the man I'd become. After the conference, Theodore pulled me aside. "You killed it, Sam. The city's board chair just told me they're fast-tracking the Gentili project. We did it." I smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "We did it, brother." As I stood there watching the crowd disperse, Grace approached quietly. "You were amazing," she said. "Guess the old man still got a little fire left." I teased. She laughed, wiping her eyes. "You didn't just represent New Dawn, Dad. You represented hope." I looked out at the fading sunlight over Treme and said softly, "That's all I ever wanted to stand for." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man rebuilding his life. I felt like a man who'd finally arrived. The week after the press conference was a whirlwind. Reporters kept calling. Community leaders wanted meetings. Donations started pouring in, some big, some small, but all carrying the same message: keep doing what you're doing. The New Dawn Center had gone from being a quiet local refuge to a citywide symbol of hope. The mayor even mentioned us on the radio, calling the center a model for compassionate redevelopment. That phrase made me laugh. Compassion had never been part of the city's development plans before. But maybe we were changing that. Still, with attention comes weight. And soon, that weight began to bend us. By the end of the month, we had twice as many visitors as before. Women were coming in from all over the city, Gentili, the east, even as far as Metairie. The rooms filled faster than we could prepare them. We didn't have enough volunteers, enough supplies, or enough chairs for all the new faces who wanted help. One afternoon, I walked into the art room to find two women arguing over a sewing machine. Miss Ruby, who'd always kept order with her no-nonsense charm, looked overwhelmed. "Mr. Everett," she said, fanning herself, "we got good problems, but they still problems. We need more space. And more hands." I nodded. "We're working on it, Ruby. Just keep holding it down for me." That night, Theodore and I stayed late, reviewing numbers. The grant from the city was generous, but it wouldn't stretch far enough to cover the sudden growth. "We might need to start charging small fees for classes," Theodore said, rubbing his temples. I froze. "Charging? Theo, we built this place for women who can't pay." "I know, but no, but..." "Money can't be the wall between them and healing." He sighed. "You're right. But we also can't help if we can't keep the lights on. There's got to be a balance." His logic made sense, but something inside me resisted. I'd seen too many good things ruined by greed disguised as practicality. "I'll find another way," I said firmly. "We're not closing our doors on anyone." Theodore studied me for a moment. "You always find a way, Sam. Just don't lose yourself trying to save everybody." He left soon after, and I sat alone in the dim light, surrounded by stacks of paper and the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. I thought of all the women depending on us, single mothers, widows, retirees, the forgotten. I couldn't let this dream collapse under its own success. The next morning, I called Victoria. "V, I need help," I said as soon as she answered. She didn't hesitate. "Say the word." Within 2 days, she had organized a fundraising campaign, Keep the Dawn Alive. Flyers went up, churches shared our message, and even local musicians volunteered to perform at a benefit concert. The Treme brass bands promised to turn out the crowd. Grace took charge of social media, posting daily videos of the women telling their stories. Her posts went viral. People all over the city were talking about New Dawn again, not just as a charity, but as a movement. But just when it felt like we were back on track, a shadow slipped through the cracks. A week before the concert, we received another letter. This one wasn't from the city. It was from a private developer. The letter was polite, almost too polite. The developer, a company called Bayou Horizon LLC, offered to partner with New Dawn for the Gentilly project. They promised new facilities, larger budgets, and brand synergy. But the fine print told the truth. They wanted controlling interest in the expansion. In short, they wanted to own our dream. Theodore read the letter 3 times before speaking. They're vultures. They see the attention, the momentum, and they want a piece of it. Grace frowned. But they're offering millions. With that kind of funding, you could help so many more women. I shook my head. Not if it means losing who we are. I've seen deals like this before. They start with help and end with control. Theodore nodded. We say no, but we better be ready for pushback. Developers don't like being told no. He was right. Within days, rumors started spreading. Whispers that New Dawn was mismanaging funds, that we were refusing progress. Anonymous social media accounts accused us of being ungrateful to the city's generosity. Grace came to my office one morning, holding her phone with shaking hands. Dad, look at this. The screen showed an online article. Trouble in Treme? Sources claim New Dawn Center rejects growth opportunities. I felt anger burn through my chest. They're trying to paint us as the problem. Theodore clenched his jaw. Typical playbook. Discredit the locals. Take the land. We spent the next week doing damage control. Grace used her PR background to craft clear messages online, while Victoria contacted local journalists who knew the truth. But it was exhausting. Every victory seemed to come with a price. One night, after everyone had gone home, I sat outside the center again, staring at the mural of the rising sun. The paint had started to fade a little from the weather, but the colors still glowed faintly under the streetlights. Grace came out quietly and sat beside me. For a while, we didn't say anything. The night air smelled of jasmine and rain. I was thinking, she said softly. You're right not to take their money. I looked into Bayou Horizon. They've bought out 2 nonprofits before, one in Baton Rouge, one in Lake Charles. Both shut down within a year. I turned to her, surprised. You did that research. She nodded. You're not the only one who can fight for this place. I smiled faintly. Guess not. After a long pause, she said, You know, I used to think success was about how high you could climb. Now I see it's about how much you can lift others while you're climbing. That's a good way to put it, I said. Your mama would have liked that. Grace looked at me, her eyes shimmering in the soft light. I hope I'm finally making her proud. She's been proud, baby. You just couldn't see it before. For the first time in a long while, Grace rested her head on my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it carried years of silence, regret, and reconciliation. The concert that weekend was a triumph. The streets of Treme came alive with music, brass bands, gospel choirs, food vendors. Hundreds showed up, waving banners that read our community, our voice, our new dawn. When it was my turn to speak, I took the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, women, children, old men clapping in rhythm. They tried to buy us, I said, my voice steady. They tried to scare us. But we don't sell our soul for comfort. We fight for our dignity. We fight for each other. The crowd erupted. Trumpets blared, drums thundered, and for a moment, the whole block felt like it was breathing in unison. That night, when the music faded and the crowd dispersed, Theodore clapped me on the back. You just put every developer in the city on notice, old man. Good, I said, smiling. Let them know Treme ain't for sale. He laughed. That ought to be our next mural. As we packed up the last of the chairs, Grace hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Dad, she whispered. Not just for the center, for standing your ground. I'm proud of us, I said, pulling her closer, for finding our way back. But even in that moment of joy, I knew storms were still out there, waiting. Growth never came without struggle. And sometimes, the hardest fight wasn't against the world. It was against the parts of yourself that still doubted you deserved peace. That fight, I knew, was still coming. 3 months passed after the concert, and the storm we'd been bracing for finally arrived. Not the kind that tore down houses, but the kind that tested the soul. The New Dawn Center had survived the attacks, the rumors, the pressure from developers. Donations were steady, and the city confirmed the Gently expansion was officially approved. We'd done it. We had won. But life has a way of humbling even the strongest victories. It started with a pain in my chest one quiet morning. Just a sharp pinch, like a warning. I brushed it off. There was too much work to do. Too many women counting on me. But by the end of the week, the pain grew worse. One afternoon, as I was finishing paperwork in my office, the room spun. My coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I reached for the edge of my desk, but my knees gave out. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed, the steady beep of a heart monitor in my ear. The light was soft, sterile, and Grace was sitting beside me, her face pale and wet with tears. "Dad," she whispered, "you scared the hell out of me." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "How long?" "2 days," she said, gripping my hand. "You had a mild heart attack. The doctor said it could have been worse if Theodore hadn't found you when he did." Theodore was standing in the doorway, his eyes tired but relieved. "You really know how to give people a scare, old man." I managed a weak smile. Guess I just wanted a few days off. But inside, I felt the truth settle like a weight. My body was reminding me that even warriors have limits. Over the next few days, visitors came and went. Miss Evelyn with her biscuits, Victoria with her fierce prayers, and a dozen women from the center bringing flowers and handwritten notes. "You built more than a building, Mr. Everett," one of them told me softly. "You built us." Those words stayed with me. When I was finally discharged, the doctor's orders were clear: rest, medication, and no stress. But stress was like air in my world, impossible to avoid. So I made a promise to myself. I'd slow down, but I wouldn't stop. Grace insisted I move in with her for a while. Her apartment in Mid-City was small but cozy, filled with plants and sunlight. The first night there, she made me vegetable soup, too salty, but the best thing I'd tasted in months. "You really think I'm just going to sit here and watch daytime TV all day?" I teased. She laughed. "You're going to heal. Then you'll do whatever you want, as long as it's not dying at your desk." For weeks, I rested. I took walks with Grace through the park, talked with Victoria every evening, and even joined one of the therapy sessions online to check on the women. But something had changed in me. For the first time, I started thinking about what would happen after me. One afternoon, Theodore came by with folders in hand. "You're looking better," he said. "Trying to," I replied. He sat beside me. "The city's offering more funding for Gently. They want us to open by spring." "But Sam," he paused, "I need to know if you're ready to lead again. If not, we can delay." I looked out the window. The sun was filtering through the oak trees, casting long golden streaks across the floor. "I'm not the man I was a year ago, Theo," I said slowly. "But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's time I start letting others lead too." He smiled, understanding immediately. "You're talking about Grace, aren't you?" I nodded. "She's been showing up, not just helping, but listening. The women trust her. They see in her what I used to see in myself, hunger for redemption." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying it's time to start passing the torch. I can still guide, but the next generation needs to build the fire." A week later, I returned to the center for the first time since my heart attack. The women greeted me with cheers and tears, their arms open, their hearts full. Grace stood at the door, holding a bouquet of white lilies, Marilyn's favorite. "Welcome home, Dad." The building looked more alive than ever. The walls were freshly painted, the mural touched up with new colors. A new phrase had been added above the sunrise: "Hope grows where we care for it." During our weekly meeting, I stood in front of everyone. My voice was steady, but inside, I felt a tremor of emotion. I've always believed New Dawn was about giving second chances. I began. But maybe it's about something deeper, about learning to trust life again, even after it's broken you. I looked at Grace. That's what my daughter taught me. She blinked back tears, smiling. "I may not be able to run around like I used to," I continued, "but I've decided who will help lead the Gently Center." I gestured toward her. "Grace Everett." A collective gasp filled the room. Grace's hand went to her mouth. Dad, You earned it, I said softly. You understand what this place means. You've seen what it does. You've lived both sides, the one who needed help and the one who gives it. The room erupted in applause. Theodore grinned and clapped her on the shoulder. Looks like you're stuck with us now, Miss Director. Grace laughed through tears. I'll do my best. I promise. After the meeting, I sat outside watching the sunset over Treme. The city buzzed with evening life, jazz echoing from a distant bar, the scent of gumbo in the air. Grace joined me quietly, sitting close. Dad, she said softly, I never thought you'd trust me with something so big. I didn't either once, I admitted. But trust ain't about being perfect. It's about showing up when it matters. She nodded, then took my hand. Thank you for not giving up on me. I smiled. You gave me reason not to. We sat there in silence for a long time, the kind that feels sacred. Months later, when the Gentilly Center opened its doors, I stood in the back of the crowd as Grace gave the opening speech. Her voice was strong, confident, full of the same fire I once carried. She spoke about love, about community, about how even broken hearts can become foundations for something greater. When she said, My father taught me that forgiveness is not a finish line but a bridge, my eyes filled with tears. The crowd applauded wildly, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel fully: peace. After the ceremony, Grace found me standing under a magnolia tree. What did you think? She asked. I chuckled. You stole half my lines, but you delivered them better than I ever could. She laughed, resting her head briefly against my chest. Guess we're even now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked around at the women laughing, the children playing, the sound of trumpets drifting from a nearby porch. Treme was still alive, still singing. And in that moment, I understood something simple but eternal. I didn't build New Dawn to leave a monument. I built it to leave a melody, one that others could keep playing long after I was gone. Grace looked up at me, smiling. You ready to go home, Dad? I took one last look at the center, at the world we'd rebuilt from heartbreak and hope. Yeah, I said softly. I'm home already. And for the first time in 70 years, I truly was.